Welcome everyone. We're here today with some guests from Johnson & Johnson for a shared exploration for STEM and careers in science. And before we commence, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands on which we meet today, and they are a multiplicity of lands given our current circumstances. And I pay my respects to Elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I'd like to now welcome Grant Mellor from Johnson & Johnson to provide a brief overview of our session today.
Hello everybody, good morning, almost afternoon. Great to virtually be on a call with you, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for joining the call. Look, it's just a quick introduction, I guess, about who I am. So I'm the head of quality for Australia and New Zealand for Johnson & Johnson, and I've been with Johnson & Johnson for almost 19 years now, actually. So and I just I have had a wonderful career, with J&J in STEM. I started out as an engineer in our R&D facilities, one of our R&D facilities, and then over the years have worked through different roles in research, design, development, engineering, now in quality, but also have a lot to do with regulatory, supply chain, and many other cross-functional partners in our organisation. So I've had a very, very fulfilling career, and I think one of the things I'm particularly thankful for is that the organisation has certainly provided opportunities, for a diverse range of experiences in that pathway. And I think what I'm most excited about now is just having the opportunity to be part of a diversity and inclusion pillar within Johnson & Johnson, and in particular the what we call the We STEM pillar, which is all around this today, where we're here to help give everybody on the call some insights into career pathways. What does it mean to take the leap out of the world of study and university into industry, and just hopefully with some of the fireside chats that we've got set up today, you'll find some of these insights really, really helpful and valuable. So look, it's a great honour, a great privilege to be a partner as an industry partner in this way, and we're very, very happy to support that, and hope we can help provide some ideas for your journey into a STEM career. That I think it's fair to say that it's maybe been said a fair bit, but there actually is. It's never been a more exciting time to be in STEM, and I think we're certainly going into a new world post-COVID, a new normal. We're reimagining what digital looks like, digital solutions, technology solutions. Obviously, we're in the healthcare space in a range of different disciplines, whether it be our drug pharmaceuticals division, whether it be our consumer health division, or the medical devices, or our vision, Johnson & Johnson Vision division. And in all of those spaces, we're absolutely reimagining the future of healthcare. And I can absolutely tell you that the future is really, really exciting in STEM. There's so many opportunities as part of the new world coming out of COVID and beyond, where career pathways around STEM are going to be absolutely crucial to the new world. And certainly we are supporting many of those pathways through the Johnson & Johnson organisation. So look, a great welcome today. It's so exciting to have you all, and it's so exciting to see your interest in STEM careers and STEM pathways. So a very, very warm and a big welcome. I'm glad we can be an industry partner for you all, and hopefully you, I know you'll get a lot out of the rest of the session today, and so welcome. And I'll hand back to you, Helen.
Thank you, Grant. Just to get us all on the same page, STEM, just to remind us all, is science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine. So just to introduce myself a little more fully, I'm an associate professor in health. My speciality is in medical science, and that I also happen to be the health employability lead. So I have a really keen interest in supporting our graduates both through their degrees and transitioning from their degrees into employers such as Johnson & Johnson, who really do encompass the full scope of the STEM organisations within the universities. So for those of us who have joined the session today, thank you. And I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that in the chat there'll be some questions being raised, and these are for you to respond to, and we'd like you to respond to them, the response that actually fits you best by using a like or a thumbs up. So keep your eye on the chat progressively as we're going through, and that'll help inform us. If you've got questions as well, you're free to actually contribute those in the chat as well, and we'll try and get them presented to our guest presenters today. One of the things that Grant's really clearly identified is that it is a changing world, and that with that changing world, there's sometimes anxiety, but there's also opportunity and opportunity for innovation as well. And the challenge is that the expectations of students, employers, universities, accrediting bodies, parents, and even the wider community are all focused on the disruption that's going on. And it's not just COVID, it's the fact that we're in probably one of the most rapid periods of change of employment and workplace that we've ever experienced, but certainly humans have ever experienced. And so this rapid change brings with it its own uncertainty, and this webinar is a fantastic opportunity that we've had provided by our partners in Johnson & Johnson to highlight how individuals have actually transitioned their journeys and been working with Johnson & Johnson, but also the characteristics and features that you in the audience may actually be able to utilise and take on board to help give you the confidence to pivot and adapt to better suit yourself to the changing world. So there's increases of concern with regards artificial intelligence, and you see the headlines, they're taking over jobs. They're also creating jobs, and that's the push that we want to really encourage people to think that there's positive opportunity rather than focusing on what's changing away from what we're familiar with. The unfamiliar can be quite challenging, but it's really a fantastic opportunity. So we've got two representatives really to encapsulate a wide range of skills and talent from our collaborators in Johnson & Johnson. We have Alexandra Daskal, and we have Sandy Esho. And between the two of them, they've got an amazing array of experience and expertise. And Sandy is the head of HR for Janssen, Australia and New Zealand, and coordinates and partners, particularly with business leaders, to look at recruiting and getting the best people for the job. So really focused on what skills you're bringing to the job, what the job actually requires. And I hope we can get some really cool insights from Sandy regarding how best to upskill or fill those potential gaps that she commonly sees when looking at recruitment. Alexandra has had an amazing career journey herself, in that she's not only a pharmacist, but she's also done additional master's training in public health and health management. And she's really focused on bringing those skill sets into connecting better with community through education and marketing initiatives into healthcare professionals and the wider community. So really fantastic opportunity to ask these two great people questions as you go through the chat. So just to get us started, I was hoping that Sandy may wish to reveal to us an answer to a question about an embarrassing career story. So is there something that didn't go quite the way you anticipated during your career? And just let us be reassured that we're all human.
Hi, Helen, and hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I just start by saying I can't actually see how many people are on the call, but hi to all the students on the call. I had the pleasure of attending your event last year face-to-face at Griffith Uni, so it's a shame we can't meet face-to-face this year, but this is the wonderful new world we're in. Embarrassing career story. Wow, I have plenty. I don't know what's appropriate to share. I think as you go through your career, you pick up a lot of new skill sets, not just in terms of technical knowledge, but also behavior. And I think early on in my career, I was very ambitious, and I still am, but I used to, from a behavior perspective, really struggle to get my message across in a way that wasn't wasn't detrimental to the perception of me. And I remember getting some feedback. Something hadn't gone my way in terms of a role. I had been offered a new role, but it wasn't the title that I had asked for. And again, I look back now and I think, oh, how silly. Titles don't even matter. What you're doing and the experience you're getting is so much more critical. But I remember having a conversation with my manager, really underprepared, and expressing that I wasn't happy with the title, and I remember her just pausing and saying, just have a think about how you positioned that, and I have learned so much from that day, and the people now actually say I have a skill in positioning things, and I think if it wasn't for that feedback and that experience, I probably would have been that same old seeing that same old behavior. But I think that was a turning point in my career and how I think about opportunities given to me and experiences, rather than focusing on things that are far less important around title.
Thanks, Sandy. That's an amazing example of how you've made a really great skill set change, and from something that was probably not ideal in the first approach to doing it. Alexandra, would you have something you'd be willing to share too in terms of a career story that you may have learnt from?
Definitely, and I think with Sandy I have many, unfortunately, and again, I'm not sure that I should be sharing a lot of these, so I'll just pick one. But oh yes, I also wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to let me speak to everyone today. I think this is actually amazing because when I was actually studying my first degree in pharmacy, we never had anything like this. So this is actually amazing, and it's a good opportunity for everyone to see where you can actually go with your careers and where you can go with your degrees, because having a degree in something doesn't actually mean that that's where you're going to end up, 10, 20 years down the track. Anyway, back to my embarrassing story. I won't get out of it that easily. But I think mine was actually getting into J&J. So I had a couple of great phone interviews, and the next round for J&J was a face-to-face interview. And I had done all my research. I knew who I was meeting. I had a background on the company. All my due diligence was done. I always make a point of arriving at interviews at least half an hour early, because I have this thing where I need to get all my pent-up energy let out. So I pace around blocks. It's really weird, but if you ever have any issues with that, I highly suggest it. So I left actually an hour before my interview started, and I only live 15 minutes away from the office. But I turned the corner just at the top of my street actually, and I hit standstill traffic. And there'd been a massive accident on the Anzac Bridge. It had closed the bridge, and it turns out I was an hour late for my first interview. And so I thought that was it. I was never going to get the job. They'd be like, no, she's not good with time management. I thought I was done for. But I actually turned it around, and I made sure I called the interviewer early, explained my situation, and somehow I still got the job. So there we go. That was my embarrassing experience.
I don't think that's too embarrassing, Alexandra. I think that's showing how well prepared you were, and communication skills were fantastic, that you kept them updated as to what was happening. I was wondering if you could also share a little bit about your personal career journey, because you've done a number of different qualifications and starting off in pharmacy. So how did you get your first job? And some of the key factors that you think have either influenced you or helped you, make those career changes.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think often when you start out at university, you think your career is going to go in a straight line. You think you're going to move up. You don't really think about the other opportunities. So when I first finished pharmacy, in pharmacy in Australia, you have to do an intern year, which basically enables you to become a registered pharmacist in Australia. So did my 5 years, became a registered pharmacist at 21. I was ready to go. I thought I knew everything about the world of pharmacy. I thought I was going to get out there in a pharmacy, and things quickly changed as soon as I kind of went into the real world and kind of understood a little bit more about the business side of pharmacy. And it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. You can have all the clinical skills in the world, but they don't teach you at university how to communicate with patients when you've got to deliver bad news, or they've just received bad news, and that whole emotional face-to-face component. You can't be taught that. It's things that you kind of experience along the way. So I guess I was all prepared with the clinical side of things, but underprepared with everything else. So yeah, I got my first job in pharmacy, gung-ho, loved it at first, and then I accepted a role that was a little bit different to what I wanted. So it was moving from a very community-based pharmacy to one actually inside a university. I was the only employee in the pharmacy, and it quickly changed my idea of pharmacy. And one thing I learned is that you should never let one job affect your idea or your perception of a career. And I think a good thing for me was I spent 6 months in that role. I ended up, because I was not sure where I wanted to go after that, so I took 3 months off. I went traveling in Europe. I did everything that I wasn't able to do with all my years of studying before that. I met a few people overseas because I did a few courses. So I did a summer course at Oxford, and I met this gentleman who actually probably kind of kick-started kicked around the idea of my head of what I could actually do outside of pharmacy. And so he was actually a professor at the university, and he's like, well, what else can you do? And I was like, that's a great question. Just being a pharmacist, just having a pharmacy degree doesn't mean that I just have to be a pharmacist. So I came back to Australia. I enrolled in Masters of Public Health and Health Management, and I still worked in pharmacy. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And as time progressed, I became to enjoy pharmacy. I got to enjoy pharmacy a lot more, but I was also enjoying the other aspects that I was learning through my other degrees. So after spending, I think it was about 5 or 6 years working as a community pharmacist, I decided to make the transition into another field. So I moved into a medical writing role at a healthcare agency because for me that was mixing my new skill set with my degrees, but also my passion for helping people. So I kind of did that for a little bit, and then I worked with Johnson & Johnson to try to launch a new product, which didn't end up launching in the end. And from there, I was able to kind of get an idea of what working at Johnson & Johnson was like, which was fantastic, kind of got an idea of some of the roles. And from the connections that I had made there, I was able to move into the company in a role that suited me, and basically took into account all my different skills and knowledge that I'd gained, and also was, for me, personally motivating, and kind of encapsulated all the values that I wanted to to bring forward in my career. So kind of like jumped a little bit from pharmacy to medical writing to now Johnson & Johnson. So a little bit like this.
Well, that's always reassuring to hear that you know, you've got the ability to pivot and adapt and change and really pursue the things that are your passion. And I think, Sandy, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of an idea about your career progress and how you've adapted, or the key factors that have influenced how you've progressed your career in HR, because you're going to have so many great insights as to in our future discussion about what our graduates really need to look at.
Yeah, sure. So I think being in HR is quite good in the sense that it is very easy to move from industry to industry. So I started my career with Johnson & Johnson over 10 years ago now, and I did a few roles there, and then after 4 years I decided I wanted to spread my wings, and I went to financial services just because I wanted to completely change of career in terms of industry, and obviously I came back after a few years, but I think I've always approached my career with just being completely open-minded. I'm not an overly whilst I'm ambitious, I don't necessarily have a detailed career plan around where I've wanted to go. I always focus on just doing my best every day, and really I think that brings so many opportunities just through that. I think if in an organization where people do well, perform well, and people see potential in them, you know, you're going to gain advocacy from others, and really, you know, really, if you're open to opportunity, and I have always been, you know, whatever has been suggested as a next step, I've always, I mean, sometimes very apprehensively and nervously, and the job I'm in now, I was promoted a year ago, and I hadn't been chasing this job, and it had been suggested to me that this is something I should look at, and I remember at the time going, oh no, I'm not ready for that. So sometimes, you know, you don't believe in yourself, but if you've done, you know, a good job and really focused on relationships and a network, I think, you know, people can also look out for you. It's not to say it's the only way to progress your career. You certainly have to think about what gets you out of bed, what makes you happy. And I've always, I think that was one of the reasons I came back to J&J, because, you know, I missed working in an organisation where I could really, whilst I wasn't directly contributing to, you know, patient outcomes, I missed going into I went from an organisation that gives people, that improves people's quality of life, that saves lives, that I could go on to a company that, you know, issues credit cards. So I didn't have the same level of, I guess, energy or passion around getting out of bed every morning. And so that was one of the reasons I came back to J&J, is because, you know, I needed that purpose to really get me out of bed. And so, yeah, I think just to summarize, I would say I've always been very open-minded. And taken on opportunity when it's been thrown at me. And I think that's one of the things I really look for when I'm interviewing people, is can they adapt? Are they open to, you know, being put outside their comfort zone? Because it's not certain skill sets, particularly for graduates. You know, you don't have a great deal of experience you can draw on in interviews, and that's okay. It's more of those softer skills that Alex touched on earlier that are really critical. And I think you can see passion in people. You can see, you know, people that are willing to go outside their comfort zone, that are adaptable. And they're such critical things to build in your career, but also if you can work on them, the earlier on in your career, the better, because that's really going to accelerate you to bigger and better things. Yes,
Sandy, I can't agree more in terms of focusing on the the personal skills and what people call generic skills, but they're actually key skills. At universities, we often focus so much on discipline knowledge or technical knowledge, or getting that correct answer, and we're not always focusing on us as an individual and how we can actually portray ourselves. And as you said, the self-confidence is really important. And you're not going to necessarily be experienced, but you can be confident in who you are. And I think Alex was commenting on that too, really powerfully. And I'd really like to hear from Alex now about what the sort of advice you'd have for students who are about to graduate in terms of trying to diversify or widen that focus that you've alluded to already, or you both have actually.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I mean, as I touched on before, and as Sandy said, when you finish university, you don't have everything that's necessarily required on a job description, and most of the time you'll have 2 out of 10 things. And I think my biggest piece of advice is, even if you don't fulfill all the criteria on the job description, still go for it. There's lots of jobs I've gone for or applied for along the way where I've thought, I'm not sure personally that I can fulfill that role given the tick boxes. But I think and as Sandy touched on before, you really need to be confident with yourself and confident with the skills that you have. And I think another really important thing is, the cohort that you're going through university with, they're going to be the cohort that you're going to be in touch with later on. And I think it's really important to build your connections with your cohort now, because you'll never know when you will need to pick up the phone and give somebody a call, even if it's just for advice, a little bit down the track. So networking within, that's another thing, finding a mentor, really important. You need somebody outside of your family and outside of your friends who is going to be your champion. And I think I found someone quite early on in my career who I was able to go to for advice outside of family. I've come from a Greek background, so people are like, my family is like, you study pharmacy, you must be a pharmacist. But you kind of need somebody outside of that to give you a different perspective on what you can do and what you can achieve, and kind of tap into those softer skills that you didn't even know that you really had early on. So they were kind of my 3 pieces of advice. So mentor, networking, and just go for things that you're not entirely sure that you can do, because you can do it. Yeah.
That's great advice, Alex. And it actually, one of the challenges that students talk about to me at uni is that they don't know where to find a mentor. And so the university has actually got a really large number of people like yourselves who have reached to the university and said, I am willing to be a mentor. And so there is opportunities that the university can facilitate in different professions, and even the career profession you're aiming for. So that's really good information. So Sandy, from your perspective, you indicated that you're interested in seeing the adaptability and the communication skills of the candidates for potential employment. What advice would you give to students or near graduates, but also what sorts of things are you looking for in addition to those sets?
Yeah, great question, Helen. I think a couple of things. I think I say this to everyone, and I experienced this when finishing university. You want to get into your first proper job, and you don't really have experiences to draw on, and you think, oh God, I've got, how am I going to be offered this role? And I think particularly for graduates, I think I would be going into any interviews with a really clear plan around what you want people to take away from the interview. So often, you know, and I'm often on the interviewing side, but you know, it can be very reactive. You get asked a set of, say, 10 questions and you respond, and sometimes you walk away and you think, oh God, but I didn't get to tell them about this experience, or I didn't get to tell them about this skill set that I think I have, or this feedback I had. So I always say to people, you know, go into an interview when you're meeting a prospective employer with a plan around what are 2 or 3 things that you want them to walk away thinking about you or knowing about you, because it's one thing to be reactive. You've got to respond to questions. That's the nature of an interview. But sometimes you don't get the opportunity to highlight the things that make you you and make you, you know, a good fit for roles. So, so some planning, I think, is always important. I think knowing your purpose, and I think that's a big statement, because people take a long time to figure that out. Sometimes I'm still figuring that out, but I think just being really clear and reflecting on what is your passion, what gets you out of bed in the morning, and having that portrayed is something that really, I think, stands out for me when I meet new people in terms of thinking about them for jobs, because passion or energy, or, you know, that is seen in every day in your work, and that goes a really long way in the workplace. So being really clear around, yeah, what gets you out of bed in the morning, and how are you going to articulate that to a prospective employer as well. But I think just to sort of recap what I already spoke about, I guess, the ability to be adaptable and go outside your comfort zone, for me, are really critical, because I believe you can put, and I've seen it a lot in my career, you put someone with a certain background in a role that you go, oh, they don't really on paper have the right skills and experiences, but with the right mindset and the right learning agility, I think anyone can do well in anything. So, and I've seen it many, many times. So, you know, think about how you're showing up, and don't get too caught up in questions you're going to ask, but really think about who you are as a person, and how do you portray that.
That's really, really lovely advice to hear, because I have a lot of students who, through sort of career planning type sessions, are very worried about interview, because either they experience anxiety or they have a learning disability that means that they maybe can't respond as quickly as someone else would. Yeah. And I was wondering if you could provide a bit of advice regarding the importance of diversity, you know, across the board in terms of HR and how that's recognised and valued.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think diversity and inclusion is a strong focus for a number of organisations in the world right now. But I'm really proud at J&J that we have had this as a focus for us as an organisation from day one. You know, decades ago, I think we are very proud of the fact, even as when we started, I don't think I'm going to get the numbers right, but we had really, really gender diverse employee population from day one, when we had a handful of employees. And that has really lived through our history. And I think there is a big focus for us, not only about embracing gender, so making sure we have enough females, enough males represented, but all different types of diversity dimensions. You know, how we being a strong employer and attracting, you know, people with a disability, how we doing the same with our indigenous population. So there are lots of, we actually have a dedicated role within our organisation that looks at diversity. And we do a whole heap of work around inclusion. So I think, you know, one thing we talk about a lot is in society is diversity and how important diversity is. But the next level of that, it's not only just bringing in the right people that are diverse, but also how do you make sure everyone is included? And we have a wonderful sort of tagline. You can tell I'm not a marketer, but that is around "you belong," and we want, our aspiration is really that every employee in our organisation, no matter what their background, no matter what their situation, that they feel like they belong. And that is really something we live and breathe, and it's quite a big part of our culture. And I think, particularly in pharmaceutical, we have, I can speak for pharmaceutical because I'm working in that part of our company at the moment. We're looking at gender diversity. The pharmaceutical industry, in terms of companies, are weighted towards females. So we have, 65% of our population is female, which is fantastic in a lot of ways, but we need to make sure that we're being equally, inclusive to both males and females, and we want to progress females' career, but we want to make sure that men aren't in any way impacted by that. So it is very much a top focus area for us across our organisation, and I'm really proud of the work that we've particularly done over the last few years to progress that D&I agenda. And I think this partnership with Griffith University is one of the many initiatives that is an outcome of our focus on diversity and inclusion.
I think that's really fabulously reassuring, and I'll certainly be using that clip in some of my courses. So thank you, Sandy. We've just had a question in the chat, and I think Alex, you might be able to provide some insight here. Just from an overseas pharmacist who's studying a Master of IT. Can you just give a bit of a view of how they might be able to use that combination?
Sure. I think further studies for me is always a really important thing. So for myself, I'm actually doing even further study now. So I'm doing a Master of Cancer Sciences, doing that virtually at the moment as well. So I understand how challenging it can be, but it's also really rewarding. So I think with any degree that you do, it forms the basis of your knowledge, but it kind of doesn't form your career. I think everything else that you do kind of ladders into that. So for instance, with the gentleman who's doing the IT, Masters of IT, everything that he's learned from pharmacy and everything that he's learning from IT can be pulled together to make this sort of amazing array of experience and knowledge that can be used to better outcomes for patients in some sort of way. So, I mean, just looking at it top line, we have so many opportunities now coming out of COVID where we're trying to use IT in healthcare. And I think that, having the background of how medicines work and how they actually can better people, not just by not just the medicines itself, but the journey that the patient goes through, can actually sort of lead to better outcomes. So I think it's amazing to do, extra study, and I think, yeah, all the skills kind of marry up in the end. And I think, as Sandy touched on before, having some sort of thing that's like a personal motivator is really great. So if you're really passionate about IT and also passionate about pharmacy, you're going to actually build something that's actually incredible, because bringing those two passions together, it's how we get amazing results in the end. So it's great.
That's so true, because we actually have an example of marrying the pharmacy and the IT amongst one of our academics and in pharmacy, and Gary Grant is amazing because he's doing virtual reality and virtual pharmacies for doing pre-placement and placement training, so that we know that it's challenging with COVID, but using all these new technologies in the training is absolutely fantastic. So yes, it is possible to marry even what seems to be the most bizarre collections of qualifications. And I never thought as a student at school that I'd end up being an anatomist, that one, what was one? I didn't know. And the second thing is that, hey, because I was interested, I designed and built an anatomy department or anatomy school for Griffith. So that was simply because we didn't have one and I wanted one, and it was ideal time. So you can create opportunities, as you're both saying, in ways that you'd never think when you start out in a particular position. So one of the things that students are really focused on, and graduate students in particular are focusing on, is how you perceive the industry is changing, and whether it's sort of more the technology drive. So what sort of skills are they going to need, or would you recommend that they might, and it doesn't have to be university skills, but skills that you both might think could contribute to adapting to the technology? Maybe Sandy, if you'd like to try first.
Yeah, sure, Helen. I think it's an interesting question, and I won't go on for the third time about the skills that I talked about, but I think they are just as critical in an environment like this. I think COVID, as Grant was touching on earlier, is just it's transforming our world, and I think I've actually seen from a people perspective in our organisation, certain people shine. The way they've dealt with ambiguity and navigating through a time where we don't have the answers and we don't know what is around the corner. You've had people that in a very structured, known environment do really well, and you take that away and you see people respond differently. So I think that those skill sets I talked about earlier I think are critical. I think healthcare is digital is the future, and it's increasing, and I think it's been accelerated to a level that we hadn't anticipated. If I think again about the pharmaceutical industry, the way that we are engaging with our customers, so our doctors, the specialists are our customers, and that has completely changed. But the way that doctors are engaging with patients as well, telehealth, and it's a whole new world. And I think again, people that have been successful in the past with face-to-face relationships, now having to rely on digital platforms is challenging for some people. And I think actually being a millennial that is generally quite tech savvy is really beneficial in this world. And I think this group as graduates going into a workforce at this time actually puts you in a really good position, because unfortunately those that are slow adapters or are less comfortable with digital platforms or connecting with people in a digital way are really finding it challenging. So I actually think relationships are still important, but we're seeing that the face-to-face element is limited now. So, and we know that that's not changing anytime soon. So yeah, I think from a skill set perspective, graduates, just by the world that we've grown up with the internet, and digital is a way that we just connect in everything that we do, really puts graduates in a really good position going into the workforce, because that's what organizations need right now. So yeah, that's a little bit from my perspective. But Alex, over to you.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Sandy. But I think, yeah, from my perspective, I think looking at it from a personal but also a professional. So I'll split it out. So from a professional point of view, we've had to reimagine what talking to healthcare professionals looks like. And yes, we don't have our face-to-face anymore. We don't have conferences. We can't send out our teams anymore. So we've had to kind of look at different ways to achieve that. And I think, yes, like the generations that are coming up, the individuals who are graduating now are the best place to kind of navigate that. And they bring a fresh perspective into things as well. So I think it's an exciting time to kind of be moving into your careers. But then from a personal point of view, I think ambiguity is something that, yes, 2020 has taught us that we have to be comfortable with. And I think it's kind of like, how do we fit life into our career, or how do we fit careers into life when things keep changing and evolving? And I guess from a very personal perspective, like last year, I was hit with an experience whereby I had to pivot myself. So unfortunately, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and with that comes a whole host of things. But with that, you have to learn to be okay with ambiguity. I didn't know when I was going to go back to work. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know what treatment was going to look like. So, you know, these sorts of things, they provide you with opportunities that you kind of have to look to as motivators for your careers as well. So things can be going on in your life, but you need to kind of use those experiences in your professional kind of career as well. So I'm not explaining this very well, I know, but basically use the motivators in your life to propel yourself professionally. So if I wasn't okay with ambiguity, and if I wasn't okay with things changing, I don't think I would have been motivated to come back to work, to be able to pivot my role, to ask for opportunities, to work in the cancer space at Janssen. I think, you know, you've got to use the things that are happening externally to kind of shape who you are and then build that into your career.
That's a very and wonderful response. Thanks, Alex. It's power to you that you are approaching lots of changes and ambiguity in that way, and that's what we all strive to do. So congratulations on your clear success with that approach. So I've got another question here that has been sent in. Can you give us some idea, or the students some idea about any differences or key differences that you see between working in the private sector versus public sectors? And maybe, you know, Alex, you want to have a go if you've done both? And
yeah, I guess I've kind of have I done both? Actually, Sandy, you're best able to answer this one. I will divert to you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an interesting question because neither have I, Alex. I think one thing that comes to mind with that question is, you know, we have, similar to Alex, we have a lot of different backgrounds in our organisation of our people. So we have a lot of scientists, we have a lot of you know, GPs that have wanted to do something different. We have a lot of people that have PhDs in very, very specific areas. So there are a lot of people that, whilst it's not private sector, public directly to that question, but a lot of people that you know, start their careers doing one thing, whether it's in practice, working, and I'm using obviously pharmaceutical as the example, where they want to, you know, be directly working with patients, and then take a career change and say, oh, I want to work in industry and I can impact patients' lives through a different way. And I think, whilst I can't talk to the specific public-private, I think there are a lot of transferable skills across anything that you do, as I touched on earlier. So I think as long as you've got that learning agility, we talk a lot about learning agility at J&J, just the ability to try something new and learn new skill sets. I think sometimes you've just got to try different things to see what's right for you, because different things are going to energize you. I'm an example of that, going from healthcare to financial services, and that didn't work for me. And so I needed, again, back to my purpose, and that linkage to you know, an organization that was impacting people's lives was very important to me. So yeah, I think I would just recommend that people try different things, and early in your career is the best time to do different things and see what you like and see what you don't. And it's the best time now to be starting those things.
I think in general across the board, what we hear between private sector versus public is that private sector often can innovate and pivot and adapt a little more readily than the more heavily structured public sector. And so that may provide some people with more reassurance that it's a structured role and it's to the criteria. Whereas, as you've both highlighted so beautifully, you've both had role titles, but you've taken on additional skill sets and additional interests in those roles and adapted those roles to suit what you need them to do. So I think there's a little more flexibility in the roles in general, as a general sort of statement, from my perspective. So although you're talking to someone who's now been in the university for as an academic for over 25 years, so yeah, not exactly sounding adaptive, but actually within my career I have adapted quite considerably. So PhD in reproductive physiology, set up School of Anatomy, into supporting students transitioning into university, supporting them transitioning out of university. So I think I'm the closest to a generalist academic in that you can sort of see in some ways. I like to pursue passions, and my passion is supporting other people like you and your organisation. So that's a shared interest I think we all have. We do have another question, and it sounds more focused for Sandy, I think, and it's one that I get a lot, which is what kind of weight does your academic performance, your transcript, have in terms of getting to interview and then getting through interview? And I know I have my answer for this, but I'd really love to hear yours, Sandy.
No, I don't want to be contradicting anything that students hear or you say. I think obviously your performance at university is important, but certainly from my perspective, there are a lot greater things that have importance to me than what is on paper. And you can have someone that gets incredible marks at university but lacks passion or some of those other softer skills that we talked about. So I would say maybe less than what you have been led to believe, if I can be a little bit controversial. But I think it's certainly from my perspective, I can speak for myself. I probably put little importance on that. It's important because obviously you want to learn and do well, and everyone has personal goals. But I can tell you, I certainly wasn't a top student in my university cohort, and I managed to do okay with my career.
Alex, your thoughts?
I tend to agree. I also was not the university medal student, but I think the thing is to be a well-rounded student. So, doing well in what you're learning, but then also taking advantage of the opportunities that arise from university. So any of the extracurricular, associations and things that you can do, I think they all add value, rather than just being top of your class.
Well, neither of you have to worry, because that is also the advice that is being portrayed, that the university degree, particularly in some of the professions, is literally your start point. So this is your entry ticket, and you go from there. So I think what any degree actually reassures future employers about is that someone can stick to their studies focused be successful in their studies and graduate having fulfilled their task. And so some people do that over part-time, some over full-time, and so it's really almost like an entry ticket, a reassurance, if you like, from the employer perspective. Or that's sort of what I've picked up in general. So we're about to sort of wind up now, and I really thank you both for your time and such wonderful insights. I'd like to pose one last request of you both, and that is, can you provide just one piece of advice that you would give to our graduates? You've given them so much advice already, but just that last, yep, this is the one thing I want you to go away with piece of advice. Sandy?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think obviously I'm going to focus on interviews, because I think, you know, Helen, what you said really has stuck with me earlier on about how nervous students get, and that actually upsets me hearing that, because that's really not the intent of interviews. I think really focus on being yourself. You know, it's not about getting questions 100% right or you know, providing the best examples in the world. Just think about who you are and what you want to convey. And I know it's super hard. It gets a lot easier as you progress your career, but you know, don't put too much weighting on interviews and getting specific questions right, because that's not what often interviewers are looking for. So yeah, and find and just articulate what gets you out of bed in the morning. What are you passionate about? I think you may not have the answer yet, but at least start that conversation or that reflection with yourself, I should say.
Alex, your sage advice?
Yeah, it's difficult to pick one thing, but I think, yeah, find what really motivates you, because I think as the more passionate you are about something, it's going to shine through in not only your interviews, but in the day-to-day. So I think that's really important, to find your passion, your motivation, but also your personal values, because you want to make sure that they align with the workplace that you're looking to enter and your career goals. Another thing is, like, break free from what you think you can, where you think your degree will get you. Sorry, that was two.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Alex and Sandy. And it's really interesting that what we've been talking about in the last couple of minutes is addressing a number of the questions that are there about, you know, if someone's getting very high marks, does that mean they're passionate? I think that, yes, it's showing that they are passionate and focused, and that you've both given great examples about the challenges of changing careers after you've been in a job or an industry for a few years, and what you've clearly made relevant and to the fore is that you want to change, that it's you driving this, and it's then a matter of finding the best connection or the best way of marrying your passions and your enthusiasm with a job that might actually fulfill those sorts of things. So and I think we got advice earlier for another question that's been raised from Sandy, which was about and also Alex, you commented on this too, about not focusing on the criteria that you don't feel that you're comfortable or confident in, but actually saying, yes, I'm going to put it in anyway, and then leave the decision to someone else. So you can always put something down for a criteria. It may not be ideal in your mind, but it may actually be a creative aspect that really tweaks the attention of the HR person who's looking at these applications. So I think one of the challenges is we have a mindset where we're judging ourselves before we actually risk putting ourselves out there for judgment by others. And if the judgment doesn't come back the way we perceive, we use that as, you know, ammunition to say we're obviously not good enough. The reality is we might not know what the actual position was about, and we don't know the other applicants, and we don't know what the balance of skill sets ended up being, because I'm sure I've been on panels myself, and there's been times where you've morphed it a little bit because you found a candidate that you think is really going to value add in a way that the team hadn't thought of, but meets the criteria for the original role. So I think that's something that we need to reassure people about, that it is not only what's going inside our heads, but it's also risking what's going on in the employment and where we want to go ourselves. So I'll bring everyone's attention in the audience to the chat again, and ask them to visit that and respond. So asking about your confidence about a future STEM career. So please take some time and check the chat and provide that information back to us, because it's really helpful for us to design future sessions with our great collaborators with J&J. So thank you very much, Sandy and Alex, and also Grant, Johnson & Johnson and Janssen Australia New Zealand for assisting Griffith University to provide this opportunity virtually for our students. And I hope that we can keep up with the good collaboration, and we may see each other face to face in future.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.